My guest today is Brett Herskope, aka Eliherf, aka my old school Aussie mate, Brett, who of course is head of growth at Gamma and yeah, semi regular a guest on the show. Welcome back to the show, Brett.
Thank you very much for having me, Andy. It's a pleasure to be back. I appreciate some of the shout outs you've given me. I always listen to this show, as you know. So, a guest and also a listener, a fan. It's been good stuff. It's been a pretty wild last few months, really. Or yeah, well, for me, a year and a bit since Ordinal started, but really since the market heated up a few months, it's been crazy times again.
Yeah, it certainly has been crazy times, and amazing to think. Really, we're a little bit over 2 months into the year, but a lot has happened. It's been yeah, kind of a spectacular start to the year for Bitcoin, and it feels like there's plenty more to come. So I thought today, Brett, it would be quite fun just to, I suppose, acknowledge what's happening in Bitcoin. We'll talk about ordinals, talk about what you and the team do at Gamma. And later we'll delve into the wonderful world of sci-fi. But I was going to do like a kind of standalone show, just a quick one myself to kind of celebrate the Bitcoin all-time high. But it happened when I was asleep, and then it was only there for like 2 minutes. And when I woke up, it had crashed 10% again. Similar for you?
It was. I similarly, living in Australia just across the ditch, we both slept through the all-time high. I saw messages about it. I'm not surprised that it touched it and then cooled off. It certainly feels very frothy at the moment, which I think people need to be wary of. I guess like a lot of the technical analysts are very bullish, and a lot of the signs have been there, and we're just seeing the inflows in the ETFs have just been enormous. They're just not stopping eating it up. So I'm not surprised. It's really funny. We were sort of thinking back when ordinals became a thing in January last year, Bitcoin touched 15K. So to think that it is where it is now, and we might not even be in a bull proper, I think it's in a very healthy position. But I think also, when things feel frothy and feel bubbly, those sort of pullbacks are bound to happen. And I guess it just means that people need to not be deers in headlights, like keep your cool about you, stick to your strategies and whatnot. But yeah, no, slept through it. Um, Great to see though. The charts are super healthy. Like we always say, and it's a little bit cliche, but if you zoom out, we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you're exactly right, and that it did feel a bit frothy, and I guess Bitcoin is up what even just since the start of the year, it's up 56% year to date, so that's pretty good for just over 2 months, and that was basically without any pullback apart from the kind of the sell the news pullback around the ETFs, but that recovered very quickly, and then just as you mentioned, the money pouring in via the ETFs. You'd think, there's often like a bit of a similar pullback before the halving. And I think, for us to kind of front run the halving and hit a new all-time high before the halving, I don't think that's happened before either. And that's obviously just because of the sheer amount of inflows coming in through the ETF. So you don't want to say that this time is different, but it does feel a little bit different, particularly in terms of what is happening with Bitcoin. It doesn't mean we won't get the pullbacks, and you do need the pullbacks. But it's amazing how, even though I'm sure you and I we've seen these pullbacks happen, it still doesn't change. You still get that kind of doom and gloom when Bitcoin dares to dump 10%, even after like a massive run up this year. You still go, oh really?
Completely agree. I guess high lows. You see the memes start pouring in, and be like Bitcoin at 70K, Bitcoin at 60K, everyone's excited, and then Bitcoin back to 60K, everyone's upset. Um,
Exactly.
so you do definitely need to keep it in context. They're high lows, really. And so it is like that. The funniest thing I loved, obviously, us being, based down under and across the ditch. It's funny when you see the tweets about Bitcoin hitting 100,000 Australian dollars, or 102,000 New Zealand dollars. So I always love that. That's a big number. It's still a milestone. Obviously, we want to see 100K USD because that's what everybody, I guess associates with. But it is funny when you convert to your local currency.
Well, it is, but on that point, I'm sure you've seen the charts of, I think Bitcoin has now hit an all-time high, pretty much in every global fiat currency, apart from, well, I guess USD now as well. But have you seen the charts of like the Turkish currency and Argentina and any currency that has been hit especially hard by inflation, which is most fiat currencies, but obviously the US dollar having that kind of global hegemony, they're a little bit better protected than the likes of Turkish and Argentina currencies. Their Bitcoin charts look absolutely insane, charted in Bitcoin.
Totally. And I guess what's been really interesting is that the layer two kind of run with it. It almost feels like that's a bit of a narrative. People are really talking about it. For example, Stacks, and other ones, RSK and whatnot. They're kind of running with it, and they're getting a lot more attention, which has been kind of fascinating. I think obviously Bitcoin pulls the market with it, and then when Bitcoin retraces, the other ones typically dump even more. But yeah, that's been a fascinating one because obviously working at Gamma, we started on Stacks, and then we've obviously been able to adapt and evolve all the way back in January last year into Ordinals. When we were purely Stacks, we still have our Stacks offering, obviously, that's part of our product. But when Stacks got down to 20 cents, it was feeling pretty dire. And now it's, back up, has been, dangling around the $3 mark, which is like a 15x, which is a lot. And I think that that's purely been on, there's interesting things happening on Stacks, but I think that it's just that Bitcoin L2 narrative as Bitcoin starts to pick up and fee rates and whatnot with Ordinals has kind of made people really start to build out that L2 infrastructure, and it's a bit of a race. And I think people have realized that Stacks has been, it's not technically an official L2, but I guess terminology is not such a big deal. People get a bit funny about it. The maxis are like, oh, but regardless, the market decides, and that's what it has been deciding. And so the blockchains that have been building on Bitcoin, on the side of Bitcoin, however you want to define it, have done really well as well. And that's been interesting. And I think is super healthy as well, because naturally as fee rates go up and certain things might, file sizes and whatnot, and whatever you're using Bitcoin for becomes more expensive, that's great because it's all on the base layer. It's the best place for it to be. But then people are going to, want to build and create alternatives just for those sort of like cost savings, even if as you, I guess, jump to a layer of abstraction or another layer of abstraction away from Bitcoin, you're obviously losing certain security benefits and whatnot, but that's just the nature of it. It's like people, it's like Solana. People know what they get. With Bitcoin, you know what you get. With ETH, you know what you get. So, yeah, that's been a really fascinating narrative to follow as well. I heard you have, sorry, I have to say it. I heard you have Spada Boom on the other day, and he, what he was building was interesting. I guess people want to build these options for moving Bitcoin around.
Yeah, well, look, shout out to Spadaboom, who was on, about 5 shows or so ago, and just as I said on that show, I think you heard me say it, it's just it's a fun name to say because it's that Sopranos things. So shout out to Spadaboom. But couldn't agree more, Brett, in terms of that, Bitcoin layer 2 narrative, and of course, the Ordinals narrative. It's amazing how it's kind of switched around from, last bull run or 2021, it was all about Ethereum and Ethereum NFTs and Ethereum layer 2s, and that kind of whole Ethereum ecosystem, really did extraordinarily well in that bull cycle. But now, to some respects, Ethereum was a victim of its own success, and now it's a little bit confused. The layer 2 narrative and Ethereum is quite muddled, and of course, gas fees weren't great necessarily for NFTs and things like that, especially with the rise of Solana. So ETH is kind of stuck in between. Can it really be ultrasound money like Bitcoin? Probably not. And doesn't have the fast, seamless, cheap transactions of Solana. But yeah, I mean, you're close to the Stacks ecosystem and of course Ordinals. And who would have thought, 3 years ago that people would literally be saying, oh, the next big thing is Bitcoin layer twos, it's Bitcoin DeFi, it's Bitcoin NFTs. And yet here we are. And of course, not only that, but the Bitcoin ETFs, the huge wave of institutional capital just pulling everything forward and giving much more momentum to these other narratives, Brett.
It's super cliche, right? But everyone always says all roads lead back to Bitcoin.
Mm.
And most people start their blockchain journey or their cryptocurrency journey on by getting a little bit of Bitcoin. And if I ask my grandma about cryptocurrency, she's heard of Bitcoin. She likely hasn't even heard of Solana, let alone stacks. And so it makes a lot of sense. And I think that, yeah, it's been really fascinating, to touch on ordinals, to be able to store a file, regardless of the file artwork or not, any type of file directly on chain on Bitcoin, on the most preserving it, we say at Gamma, preserve your digital legacy. It's like essentially like eternalizing it on chain, the most decentralized, secure network on earth. Is amazing. And so, to touch on it in regards to like the artist's perspective, they know that their art isn't just going to potentially disappear on IPFS or Arweave or something like that. Even IRL, God, I use acronyms now when I speak out loud. In real life, in the physical world, we can't protect our most expensive assets, really. Like potentially, paintings can be burned down in a fire. There's a great scene in the Three Body Problem, which we can touch on, which I actually probably don't want to spoil too much, just about preserving legacy. And I really think that Bitcoin is the best way to do it. Patrick Stanley, who's involved in Bitcoin and stacks, he said it beautifully. He says Bitcoin was hard currency or hard money, and now it's also hard data. And I love thinking about it like that. And I think it's really expanded Bitcoin's horizons, and it's like redefined Bitcoin culture, or it's redefining Bitcoin culture as we move through it. And in life, culture is what drives society forward. The arts, sports, food, whatever. And it's just done miracles for Bitcoin. You've got all these people who have never had Bitcoin before, buying Bitcoin, trading ordinals, putting work on chain, learning about UTXOs, getting Bitcoin wallets, learning about fee rates, checking mempool.space. It's been so much fun to be a part of, and just to really like open up people's eyes as to like why Bitcoin is so incredible. And they might never have got there without ordinals, because culture has brought them to Bitcoin, not just buy some Bitcoin, put it in a cold wallet and never do anything with it, which is a healthy thing to do as well. But that didn't interest them. And I love that it's been a gateway to just introduce so many more people to Bitcoin, creators and collectors from all chains. It's just been, it's been insane to watch.
Yeah, very well said. And look, well, just while you're here, then Brett, just for those who aren't aware of what Gamma is, and even just kind of what Bitcoin ordinals are, just explain a little bit of what the kind of I guess the vision is for Gamma and what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. So at Gamma, we're the art-based platform for Bitcoin Ordinals. And what Bitcoin Ordinals are is essentially putting a file, so putting your artwork directly on chain. So it's like the best way to think about it is like you're writing it onto this gigantic digital ledger that is Bitcoin, and it can never be erased. So the artwork is then immutable, which means you can't change it. It's permanent. No one can remove it because it's censorship resistant. And it's stored on so many of these like mini computers, so to speak, called nodes, that it's impossible to ever get rid of. Like one node goes down, there's thousands of others. And so to put that into context, that is what decentralized means. Like, all of the data is not stored in one spot. The data is stored in so many places that really it's almost nigh on impossible for those files to ever be deleted or removed, or, or any of those sorts of words. So for creators, so at Gamma, we've really picked our lane with being the art-based platform. So for artists and creators and collectors, less so the profile picture kind of flipping and whatnot. We certainly provide really slick tooling for launching that sort of stuff, and have launched some really great collections and have that open to everybody. But then we also have our curated art side of the company, which is our primary focus. And yeah, we've pioneered a lot of tooling, pioneered like our Gamma Partner program, which has been amazing to get really high quality artists from all different chains who want to come and put art on Bitcoin. We developed technology to get like on-chain generated editions by them, which has just been a great way for them to find collectors, to get inscribed, to sell their one of ones. It's been a lot and a lot of fun. We also worked with Bitcoin Magazine to pioneer the only on-chain auctions on Bitcoin. So we're really building with a Bitcoin ethos, um, building for artists, and then obviously like building out a really what I think and what we've been told is, the best user experience and best user interface. Like for people who don't know what user interface is, like, you go to a site, how it looks, how it appears, how you can navigate through the site elegantly without getting confused. Um, on Bitcoin for art and artists and collectors, which has been a really great journey. And I guess, it's us and Magic Eden who are the two biggest platforms. They're much more involved in, the volume sort of profile picture side. So if you think more like OpenSea and Blur and whatnot on Ethereum, and we're much more the art focus. So I guess you can consider more like Foundation or Super Rare on ETH, just to make that comparison for people.
Yeah, got
But
it, got it.
we are obviously just Gamma, and we are focusing on what we do, but just to kind of give a little bit of a comparison for people who aren't super aware of how of the the companies on Bitcoin.
Nice. And there was quite a big controversy over ordinals for some time, and I suppose there still is. Maybe the kind of the price going up distracts people a little bit and makes them a little bit less antagonistic towards each other. But yeah, I guess what's the current state of play there? Is there kind of any softening from the, I guess, the anti ordinals maxi crowd? Are they sort of coming around to understanding that perhaps the different uses of Bitcoin is a good thing for minor fees and so on over time, or are they still pretty anti?
I think that there has been a gentle softening. There are still some really hardline Bitcoiners that hate it and think that we're littering their chain, which I love because when you preach permissionlessness and you preach censorship resistance, but then you talk about filtering out transactions, then you're sort of countering you're countering exactly what you stand for. Um, but there's been some collections, like Quantum Cats and Taproot Wizards and Ordinal Maxi Biz and Node Monks and whatnot that have onboarded so many of these people and have shown that the tech can be used in so many interesting ways, that it is actually good for Bitcoin. Fee rates, like miners made more than they've ever made last year. So like the security budget becomes less of a concern. There are way more nodes than there used to be. Bitcoin is actually being used for peer-to-peer transfers. It's being used in the way that Satoshi or whoever they are talked about. I'm not sure. Did you see the recent I suppose we can call them leaks of some of Satoshi's emails with, oh, I can't remember his name. He had a
Yeah,
European name. Uh
starts with M. I did see the emails. Yeah.
Yeah, and he, in some of those emails, he sort of like refers to the fact that this sort of thing
Mm.
may end up possible. None of this is super new. That's what I think is quite funny. He even used the word cryptocurrency to define Bitcoin. And you get a lot of the hardline Bitcoiners, and shout out, I love you, by the way, Bitcoiners, if you're listening. You get a lot of that the viewpoint that no, Bitcoin is Bitcoin and everything else is a crypto. And it's like, well, you know, when you're explaining it to people and even how Satoshi explained it, that's not necessarily, the truth. And I think, look, you're getting a lot of Bitcoiners who have softened. Like I said, I think it is redefining what it is and what it means to be a Bitcoiner. And I think that's a lot healthier because I do think that the lack of innovation was holding it back maybe in the short or medium term. This has just sped it up. Companies are building on Bitcoin, more people are using Bitcoin. Bitcoin's actually being used to transfer. Bitcoin's, every ordinal is a valid transaction that's being, time stamped and confirmed on the chain. And that's what Bitcoin's designed to do. And yeah, that was the thing. Satoshi talked about uh, something or other. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it was in those leaked emails around that it could be used as a timestamp for files. And that's exactly what's going on now, which
Yeah.
my mind blew. I tweeted about it.
Amazing. Exactly right. Well, just yeah, touching on Stacks really quick because I know you've been quite involved with those guys. I used to be in a Stacks Discord server with you called Stacks Dads. Even I don't know if that's still going. I haven't
Still
logged
going.
into still going. Correct. I haven't logged into Discord for a long time, Brett. Yeah, but anyway, is there like a sense of I guess validation from Manib and I guess the whole Stacks community that perhaps yeah, they saw this opportunity early and sure they've kind of pivoted and so on along the way, but perhaps yeah, that kind of thesis that Bitcoin could have well, effectively layer twos and could become the base chain for a whole lot of different use cases. That thesis appears to have been validated, and Manib he saw it years and years ago, really.
He's a visionary. I think he fills, I know it shouldn't all come down to one person. He filled the Stacks ecosystem with a lot of passion and drive, and he sort of almost foresaw this. The funniest thing is if you look at the Ordinals ecosystem, if you want to call it that, or infrastructure, some of the biggest players like Gamma, being the art platform for Bitcoin, the art platform for creators and collectors. So there's us, Xverse Wallet, and Leather Wallet, which used to be Hero Wallet, Alex, which is a decentralized exchange, um, you know, Trevor and what he's built out. That a lot of the biggest builders on Ordinals have all come from Stacks. And because we were so ready to we'd been building like on Bitcoin, so to speak, once we could build on top of or on the side of however you want to define it. But we were so ready to go at the start that some of the biggest movers, some of the biggest products or companies all actually came from Stacks. And I think that gave Stacks a lot of validation because it showed that all of the builders from that ecosystem were extremely talented devs and extremely talented companies. And Alex has just blown up. They've got their whole BRC20 exchange, and it's funny, Stacks meme coins are sort of taking off now as well because people are kind of like realizing that causes a lot of like UTXO bloat and kind of like traffic jams on Bitcoin. So that certainly needed to find a different sort of home. Xverse has just completely gone to the moon in terms of like way more users they are and Leather like the two best and biggest wallets on Bitcoin. I know that Phantom are coming across as well, and they sort of have already started. They'll do really well because they had a big user base to start with. But yeah, it's funny, Gamma, we all came from Stacks, and I think what that has done is there's been a little bit of cross-pollination. So some really quality Stacks NFT projects like Megapont, my own project, the Pandemonium, a few others have been able to do really cool things on Bitcoin. And then that's almost brought some Bitcoiners or Ordinals folks back across the other way. And I think they've gone, oh, okay, yeah, well, that's interesting. Stacks people and Stacks projects and Stacks devs have done all of this. Something interesting must be going on over here. So I think that's all been super healthy. But in the end, like anything, the charts win, and if Stacks coin is going up and there's more people buying it, more people look into it. So number go up is always the biggest driver for use. You can have the best builders and the best products in the world, but if no one's heard of it or no one sees price go up, then they're not really going to dabble. But because Stacks has gone up, that's been very healthy. So I say that like a little bit in jest, but I think it's because it's multifactorial, but it's the Bitcoin L2 narrative, but then also because people have noticed just how quality a lot of the products that came and were able to build directly on Bitcoin all have a home on Stacks too.
Yeah. And look, I had Mark from Leather was on the show a while ago when a little bit after the rebrand from Hero, but it always struck me at the time I guess the brand identity for Leather because they gave it a full redesign and I really like it. It looks slick. Just looking at it again now, but it's just I think I said at the time at the end of the show, I just look at it and I just think it sounds like Leather. It sounds like a BDSM dance party or something. But
see you there.
but it's really cool. It's a great wallet, and I love the redesign, slick as, BDSM references aside. I guess that actually, is kind of a nice segue into sci-fi stuff, Brett. And I do want to talk to you about the three body problem, and I guess we should just provide a little bit of context for any listeners who are regular listeners who will be familiar with the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round, in which the last question, of course, is what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show? And Brett, you can probably tell us what is one of the most common answers to that question, in your opinion.
One of the most common answers to that question is the three body problem. And if you asked me that question now, that would now be my answer. My old answer was Snow Crash, which is also a great book, but the three body problem is the most mind-blowing trilogy that I've ever read. I'm obsessed. To give a bit more color, a little bit more context to the listeners, I started reading the first one because so many of your guests, your guests, your speakers have recommended it, and it's very like um, hard science fiction, and it's beautifully written and it's very elegant. It's translated to English. It was initially written, in Chinese by an author called I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I think it's Cixin Liu, and it's not until you get to the end of the first book that you realize how quality a read it is. It's one of those slow burns. And I remember messaging you on Twitter saying, "Oh, Andy, I don't know why your guests recommend it. It's not as good as they say." But then the further you get into it, the more your mind expands, and just the themes that Cixin Liu explores are incredible, and the character development and just this setup of the story for the next two installments. I've just finished the third one, so I'm done. I actually feel like a sense of loss now that I that I don't get to keep reading it. I almost think I need to go back and reread the first one just to like maybe
So
try and notice things.
this has
It's
taken you
brilliant.
about at least a year, I would say, to get
Mm.
through all three of those books. Look, I know you're a busy guy, but that's yeah, I mean, and that's a nice pace to do something like that. But yeah, that's quite a journey.
It is. Well, yeah, they're very long.
Yeah.
Uh, but they're one of those books. You just can't. I read before I go to sleep. It's just like it helps me,
Mm.
and I genuinely just cannot wait to go and read it. It's it's just brilliant. I don't even know where to start. I don't want to ruin it because I don't want to give away spoilers. But
No,
he
well,
just
and the reason we don't want spoilers, Brett, is because incredibly, this has been adapted for television by
mm,
Netflix, by I guess, the creators, producers, showrunners, whatever, of Game of Thrones. So they've been working on this for a long time, and it
mm.
actually premieres later this month. So it's literally 2 weeks away. March 21 is when it premieres on Netflix. So yeah, I mean, that's going to be an incredible hit for Netflix, I think, because suddenly I know the three body problem. As you know, I've listened to so many people talk about it on this show. I have not read it myself, and I am, however, incredibly excited to see this. What the Game of Thrones people do with it on Netflix. It's going to be one of the sci-fi events of the year, no doubt. I reckon.
Oh, I could imagine, and I'm glad that such a quality production team is putting it together because it needs some serious, it needs to be treated so seriously. Just the themes that Cixin Liu explores, and it's really well translated. So the same translator does the first and the third one, and then the second book is translated by someone else. Um, and he just asks, the beautiful thing about it is, although it can be a little bit far-fetched, it always uses physics proper to explain things. And although you're reading this book that is so expansive, he, he's not just taking liberties and running with them, genuinely like giving everything some kind of scientific context. Um, and just asks so many questions of the reader and puts you in these positions where you're like, what would I do if I was in this character's shoes? And yeah, you identify with almost all of the characters, even the sort of like more hardline ones. You think, wow, I can see where they're coming from. these the story like weaves so effortlessly from kind of like situation to situation. You think, how did we get here? But it makes sense. I it's really mind-blowing, and I don't say that lightly. And I can't remember, you had a guest on and you kind of like referenced me and how I just started reading it, and he said he was excited for me. So shout out back to whoever that was. I can highly recommend it. It's you need to read it, Andy. I think that the show will be brilliant. I can't wait to see how they do it, because some of the scenes are so cinematic, they're so epic. And then some of the scenes are so dry and in one room, but
Mm.
those scenes are so powerful as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how they balance that.
Well, one of the things that I think bodes incredibly well for the Netflix version of the three body problem is that it's one of these kind of revered pieces of sci-fi, but also really exists in its own niche, and it's really weird, really intense, but really incredible. And I would compare that to Dune, right, by Frank Herbert, the Dune books. Very niche, very strange, very weird. And there was a very niche, weird, and strange David Lynch movie from like the 1980s, I think. But of course, the two Dune movies. Have you seen the two Dune movies?
No,
Phenomenal.
so I am one of those people that always wants to read the books first before I see the films or the shows. So I'm withholding until I read Dune. I still haven't read it. So I need to read that, and you need to read the Three Body Problem. That could be our deal.
Oh, that's quite a commitment, isn't it?
It is.
I'll answer that by the end of the show, but yeah, because we just saw June 2 on the big screen because it's obviously in theaters now, and you've probably seen everyone raving about it on
Mm.
X. But man, that was literally probably the best kind of movie experience I've had in years and years. It is so good, and it's so weird and dark and strange, like all the best sci-fi is. But oh, so good. Really, really highly recommend.
I know it's one of those things where you probably want to tell me about it in more detail, but again, we don't want to ruin it
No.
for listeners. But yeah, it's really fascinating, to think about the three body problem and how it uses history and Chinese culture and,
Mm.
weaves in all of these other cultures and then puts you in this position where you're like, what would I do if I was here? And how expansive is the universe? And how much do we value human life? What would you do if, the world was going to end? Who would you save? How, what would you do in the position of like being a president or someone in such a big position of power? Or how do you protect your family? You know, would you cryogenically freeze yourself if it meant that you could, do it safely and come out and then sort of help out with the situation in the future? Like, there's all of these ethical questions that are not so far from the truth, from what we have experienced or what in our actual lives in different ways. And I think that to write sci-fi in a way that is so humanistic and so relevant and not so out there that it's out there, but it's so realistic, and that's what makes the best movies and films. You even like a thriller, you're like, whoa, that could happen. That's why that was a good film. Whereas some stuff's so outlandish, you're like, well, this, isn't, it's fun, but it's not, it doesn't sort of like hit the same. And that's what happened in this trilogy is,
I
yeah,
love
you can hear my giddiness about it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the three body problem. Congratulations for finishing that trilogy. And look, I'm sure I will be talking about it once the Netflix show gets going here on the show. But just maybe as we start to finish off, Brett, let's just get some kind of closing thoughts on Bitcoin. And it reminds me because I think you talked about maybe some kind of ethical dilemma in the three body problem involving someone who is cryogenically frozen. And Hal Finney, of course, one of the earliest contributors to Bitcoin, possibly a candidate for being Satoshi. Even he is, as I understand it, cryogenically frozen, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And is Disney as well? Disney as well. I don't know. But yeah, Hal Finney's a fascinating one, isn't he? And like, there's just periods in that time, 2009 and 2008, where there's all of that, Bitcoin blog stuff, where he sort of disappears.
Mm.
Um, yeah, he's epic. What I think has been fascinating, we didn't touch on it in regards to ordinals. And speaking of Hal Finney, was he mined the first block that I think it was like block 78 that wasn't mined by Satoshi. He was the first one to receive sats from Satoshi in a transfer. He's really part of Bitcoin history. And what's been fascinating about ordinal theory is that people can inscribe, write these files, right? Put these artworks associated with or on's kind of the wrong word, but it's the easiest way to understand it, on these kind of like special Satoshis, or these, the smallest denomination of a Satoshi, of a Bitcoin, pardon me. So 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin is a Satoshi. And that's what you're writing these files like onto. So you put them on chain and they point at that sat. And then as that sat moves around, that artwork moves around with it. And so these people have been like sat hunting. People have been like sending Bitcoin back and forth between exchanges looking, because every sat has this data associated with it, like when it was mined, or, is it the first sat that was mined in a block, which is, given the name an uncommon sat. So there's all this like amazing kind of Satoshi rarity and sat stories. Like there's the pizza sats, from that famous pizza transaction. There's Silk Road sats. There's these uncommon sats. There's like block 9 sats, the earlier sats that are in circulation. There's these block 78s that were mined by Hal Finney. And so what I think is super fun is that's also become another kind of like layer to ordinals and ordinal theory. And as again, adds to that kind of like collectability and desirability, because as humans, you go back in time, we've been collectors. We like, nice shiny things. We want to, etch our kind of like legacy onto, the walls of caves. And now we're sort of doing it on Bitcoin, which I know might seem like a stretch, but it really isn't, when you kind of just go, well, that is a serious parallel. And I think that's been fun. And yeah, so credit to Hal. He's cryogenically frozen. Who knows what will happen? And I also just love that people do respect that Bitcoin culture and the history, and they're bringing it into the artwork and into kind of all the sats and whatnot. We're building out some really cool stuff in regards to sat rarity at Gamma, and yeah, it's exciting times. It's really fun to be working directly on Bitcoin. It's been described really elegantly by a person from Inscribing Atlantis, who are kind of like a big team who do various things in the Ordinals ecosystem, as the digital monolith. I love calling Bitcoin the digital monolith now. It really sums it up.
Yeah, wonderfully said, Brett. The digital monolith indeed. And yeah, I love that. There's just so many different layers or rabbit holes you can go down with Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin does, it can be what you want it to be, which is amazing, really. Hey, look, Brett, it's been fantastic catching up with you today. Just to acknowledge Bitcoin's brief touch of a new all-time high. I'm sure we'll get back to kind of firmly establishing a new one, much more vertical in the near future. So who knows? We'll look forward to that. But just to finish off, yeah, tell people where they can find you online. We like to hang out, and of course, if people do want to jump into ordinals, yeah, Gamma, what should they do?
Yeah, so a few things, just we'll touch on Bitcoin again. I think that it will be really interesting to see what happens post-halving. You can look back at cycles and see that, there might be a little dip, but I think that we are in a different I think we are in a different state with the ETFs, and just like the amount of Bitcoin that's being eaten up right now. I think that there will be supply shock, and people are definitely noticing that. And it's so funny, people are so much more happy to buy at 60K than they are at 15K. It's just like that funny human psychology with markets. So like I said at the start of the show, obviously like stick to your strategies and DCA. And if that's what you do, don't just buy because it's the shut, it's pumping. Like always be careful and look after yourself and make sure you can put food on the table and pay your bills. But it is exciting times. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners who've held through or done what they've done through the last cycle and through a pretty intense bear, their conviction's paying off. So hats off, and let's hope we go to all-time high and we're awake for it next time. If you want to find me, I'm at Eliherf1 on Twitter, so Eliherf1. So if you want to DM me, ask about ordinals, how do I buy? What do I do? Do I want to get a collection, my own collection up? So for artists, collectors, creators, I am always open and very accessible. Obviously, so yeah, Gamma, so gamma.io, you can connect your Xverse wallet or your Leather wallet or your Unisat wallet with a little bit of Bitcoin in it and get buying, it's super easy. Just click, click confirm. It's just like you're used to on other chains. If you've been on other chains, the infrastructure and the UX now is very different to when it started. When it started, it was very it was more tricky. Whereas now the wallet and the platform integrations are smooth, if not smoother than what you're used to on other chains. It's which has been really cool and made the collecting experience really great. Like I said, with our Gamma partner artists, we've got all this incredible art on Gamma. Their one of ones are obviously a little bit more expensive, but their editions are all very achievable. So it's not, you can get collecting buy your first ordinal, your first beautiful ordinal because it's all art based, in a couple of clicks for $20. So and some artists have got work for $5. So it's not doesn't take long to get collecting on Bitcoin, which I think is great. It's always nice to know that that piece of art that you buy is on chain forever, and you've supported an artist. You can't really lose. And yeah, so I guess you can find us like in our Gamma Discord. And where else? Look up our Twitter at try Gamma. Someone already had Gamma, so it's at TRYGAMMA. But yeah, Twitter and Discord are the two best places to find me. I'm very friendly. I don't bite. And if I do, it's softly. No, I'm kidding. I'm like I said, very, very approachable, very accessible. And it'll be a pleasure to hear from you. And I would love to help onboard more people to Bitcoin. And like I said a little bit earlier, culture has really brought the masses to Bitcoin. And I just love that. I think it's brilliant.
Awesome. Fantastic words. Thank you so much, Brett. All the best, and bye for now.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, there you go. That was Brett from Gamma. Always a pleasure to have Brett on the show. So shout out to Brett. Thanks for coming back on. Talking ordinals, Gamma, the three-body problem. I think I craftily got out of having to give Brett an answer on that deal, getting him to read June and Me, the three-body problem. I don't know. Do I have the time to read books? 3 books? Took Brett a year. Would probably take me 6 months, but yeah, we'll see. Still not agreeing to it, but I'm going to watch the show. So yeah, and we'll talk about it as the show happens. So as I say, it happens, I believe 21st of March, which is literally 2 weeks away as we record today. All right. Well, that was fun. Thank you, team, for listening. We reached the end of another show. Thank you, Brett. Cheers for listening. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. See ya.